Namaskar and welcome to this special program. S&P Global has observed a sharp rate of expansion in India's services sector over the month of August 2022. The Services Purchasing Managers Index is at 57.2 in August. It is an index which shows a gain after it crosses 50, and so it has moved up from 55 in July to 57.2. And they have attributed this to stronger gains in new businesses, improvements in demand, job creation, and overtime work as well. Significantly, it reflects the quickest rise in employment for over 14 years. And finance and insurance are the brightest areas of the service economy, while transport and ICT are seeing the fastest rise in selling prices. That indicates demand pull factors. As an economy advances, services begin to play a greater and greater role in overall GDP. This is happening in India now, and economic growth should largely be services driven going forward. So let's discuss how services are powering India's competitiveness, and to discuss this we have with us Dr. Charan Singh is the CEO of eGrow Foundation, and Deepshika Sikarwar is Senior Editor of the Economic Times. Thank you very much for being with us, both of you. Dr. Charan Singh, let me start with you. Services employment has picked up at a highest pace in 14 years. Do you see this as a result of the return of services which were hit by COVID, or the creation of new services by the digital economy?
So there are multiple factors, no doubt about it. I must mention that India is progressing. Services sector has certainly become very, very important. If you look at the total value added, then services sector is already accounting for 53% of GDP, which is very, very high. And if you look at within that 53%, it is the trade, hotels, transport, which you mentioned, communication, and services related to broadcasting. They are accounting for nearly 17%. And financial, you mentioned about insurance, financial, real estate and professional services are accounting for 21%, and then public administration, defense and other services are accounting for 15%. Very large chunk. In the recent past, there has been substantial improvement. If you look at the data which was you mentioned about the S&P, but then there is data which has been released very recently by Government of India for the first quarter, April to June. And I was looking at that data, and in that data, financial, real estate and professional services have increased by 9.2% vis-a-vis just 2% in the previous April to June 21. Yes. And if you look at the public administration, defense and other services, last year they increased by 6%, this year by 26.3%. And if you look at trade, hotels, transport and broadcasting communication services, they are rising by 25%. Now the point that I'm trying to make is that yes, post-COVID there is recovery, but post-COVID there is recovery on many things which were lying pent up earlier, and secondly many new things have come up. Now what are the new things that are coming up? I would like to mention the most important thing is of course the insurance sector. Insurance sector has been doing exceedingly well in latest times. FDI has been allowed in insurance, and big number of jobs are being created in the insurance sector. So that is one area of services which is doing very well. Okay. As far as others are concerned, like hotels and tourism, of course, as the economy is opening up, they are also doing very well.
Right. Indeed. Ms. Sikarwar, so India has become the third largest startup ecosystem in the world also, and this has happened within a span of 6 years. So this entrepreneurial spirit is being encouraged, of course, by the government and policies, and all the fastest growing startups are service oriented. So do you see India's market size growing exponentially because of the digital penetration that is happening, and hence it provides plenty of opportunity for growth and also for new entrants?
Definitely. We've seen this whole ecosystem being created for fostering of young entrepreneurs, young entrepreneurship, and the technology is available, connectivity is available, the entire ecosystem is there present for people to sort of go unleash their entrepreneurial spirits, and which is what is being seen in,
Yes. Okay, we
and
see.
even if, and you see, even during COVID, the startups were really doing well, at least some of them were really doing well.
Right.
So I think the ecosystem as has been created with policy interventions and the kind of the requirements of the industry which were there,
Yeah.
technology, connectivity, all those, that has really helped. And of course, large part of it is in services sector, because a number of these startups that we've seen.
Yes. We seem to be having a little problem with your connection, Ms. Sikarwar. So let me take this question to Professor Charan Singh. So India is home to 105 unicorns, Professor Charan Singh, with a total valuation of 338.5 billion. This was mid-July of 2022 figures. E-commerce, fintech, supply chain, logistics, they are the very economic backbone. Do you see us building further on this, or we are moving in a particular direction, it appears?
Yes, we are moving in a particular direction, there's no doubt about it, and we are doing very well. I thought I'll just share some more statistics with you, which is very, very interesting. If you compare from 1950 onwards the share of services sector, we're only talking of services, you will realize that we look at trade, repair, hotels and restaurants, the share has increased doubled from 11 to 19%. Of course, before COVID it was little higher, but then it has doubled from 11 to 19. The fintech comes under financial services, and that is, I think, substantive. Can I share the data? From 2% share in 50-51, it rose to nearly 11% now. So you can imagine how the share of this fintech, and where we have the technological advantage, is taking us substantial increase. The other, of course, is in transport, storage, communication. Now, the question that you raised in the beginning was on employment, and I must share this with you. We look at the employment data in 2009. The share of employment data was about 52%, and 2009 is not too long ago.
Yes.
Share in agriculture was 52, and services was just 26. And if you now compare it to 2019, just 10 years, you see that the share of employment in agriculture is 42 and in services 32. Such a substantial within 10 years. So the point that you made, that in the last 6 years, the startup culture is doing exceedingly well, that is very true. And one of the factors that it is doing exceedingly well is the type of incentives that have been given, the incubators that have been set up by the government, and they are encouraging the startup culture. Also, if you must have noticed, the government gave zero tax on education and health as far as GST is concerned. So there are startups now expected in education and health, which will go a long way.
Absolutely. Ms. Sikarwar, content, gaming, hospitality, data management, analytics, these are also powering India's competitiveness. So do you see, these particular fields helping India get a foothold in the international market? Because there is a wide international market for a lot of these services.
Definitely, Mark, in fact, the industry here is doing quite a lot of work, and which is a lot of background work for, a lot of multiple, technological interfaces for them. So definitely, going forward, some of the players here have the capability, and they're getting the right environment in terms of the policy intervention to grow in size and reach kids. So the potential is there, the talent is there, and the opportunity and the kind of support that they require, all that is present for them to sort of unleash their energies globally. So the
Right.
entire ecosystem is there, to see that it happens. And as it is, we're doing a lot of work in terms of content creation for a number of global players.
Right. Okay, I think we are still having a problem with your connection. Maybe there's a little network problem here as well, but hopefully it will, we'll get it organized in the course of this program. Professor Charan Singh, India is already a force to reckon with in software services, that we've seen, and it has taken software professionals from India to every corner of the world. And this is by demand. People are looking for Indian software professionals. Will expertise in other services also follow the same path for our professionals?
I must mention one thing, and I found it very interesting. Today, Prime Minister spoke at the Eastern Economic Forum.
Yes.
And I must tell you, if you look at the things that are being discussed under that forum, IT services is one of it. Of course, automobiles has also become very IT oriented these days, and they're also looking for schools. But IT services per se is a very important component at the Eastern Economic Forum. And while listening to the Prime Minister, he did mention that there are going to be potential in terms of energy, and he also mentioned in terms of other sectors, pharma and diamonds. But as far as IT is concerned, the question that you raised, just imagine that Russia is rethinking its strategy on IT. And that is where I think the Prime Minister's initiative in the Far East Look policy, and he has been participating in this Eastern Economic Forum since 2015, 2019, he went there physically. The boost that would give to the IT sector, and that's what Russia is looking for, the boost that will give to the IT sector within our country, great potential that exists there. Now,
Absolutely.
in addition to IT sector, I must also mention that there is great potential in terms of automobiles and schooling and housing. Now, these are the sectors in which India has great expertise. We have gone a long way ahead in automobiles and in school and education. We have the new education policy. So I'm looking at tele-education and things like that for meeting the Russian requirement. So I see great potential there too. So the point that I'm making is, startups have great potential now, other than IT, where we have already made a dent and the world recognizes us. I think the new areas and new explorations or the directions which are being shown by the government is going to give us further impetus to make international dent on areas in which we already have developed expertise.
Ms. Sikarwar, we can see that e-commerce has transformed the whole concept of the marketplace. We can see that distribution is creating several jobs, even business opportunities. Is the underlying infrastructure, the investment keeping pace? Because we need, when we see so many delivery people going on roads, things like that, gross fixed capital formation had expanded to 55.3% in the last FY. How do you read these signals? Do you think that, our infrastructure is keeping pace for this kind of growth?
Mark, if you see, there is an increased emphasis by the Prime Minister announced the Gati Shakti program. I mean, the whole idea was to create, the entire gamut of logistics that will support the economy, not just today, but, will also sort of cater to the needs of the growing economy and support growth in coming years. So the whole idea is to create adequate infrastructure, and we've seen capital expenditure has been sort of given a lift, and we've seen the pace of the capital expenditures it has sort of kept pace in the first few months.
Yes. And the important thing is that it creates jobs, and those jobs are going to have a multiplier effect on the economy as well. We seem to have a problem again with your connection. That's why I intervened, Ms. Sikarwar. I'm hoping that it's, that it's being restored at our end. But you come in and then it fades out, unfortunately. Let me go to Professor Charan Singh, once again, tourism has always been undertapped in our country. We have massive potential. Many people say that India is like the greatest country. It has history, geography, culture, everything, food, everything that tourism requires. And we saw how the Sri Lankan economy collapsed when its tourism sector was hit. So tourism only contributes about 9% of GDP currently. It supports about 42 million jobs. Do you see it increasing to at least 10%? When we are targeting a $5 trillion economy, 10% of that will be a huge amount supporting based on tourism.
I must mention that tourism has a great potential, but before I come to that, and because audio failed, I'd just like to mention one thing on your previous question on gross capital formation.
Yes.
Despite the COVID, despite the challenges, you will be surprised that Indian government made sure that capital expenditure in their budget is high. And if you look at the first quarter data, which has just been released by the government, you find that the gross capital formation data is positive. I think that is something one needs to celebrate, that in times of difficulty, the government has thought about the multiplier effect of expenditure, because multiplier effect of expenditure means that employment generation also takes place. So this was in response to the earlier question that you mentioned.
Yes.
Coming to the tourism, I must mention this, and I also would like to tell that tourism is one sector in our country which is totally unexplored. Going ahead, as you know, and the Prime Minister has been making this emphasis again and again, that in tourism you make one airport and make two planes land there. Just imagine, just with that little initiative, you have the hotel industry coming up, you have the transport industry coming up, you have the local taxis and guides coming up. So little expenditure at the behest of the government opens up the whole tourism industry immensely. Now, given India's potential, multiple potential, the tourism industry has to be explored, as you said about history of India, very rich, and therefore tourism industry can contribute significantly there. But as I look at it, post-COVID, there are many more avenues which have opened up. The medical tourism, which was earlier restricted only towards a few cities like Bombay, now I think that can expand across the country. Similarly, there is spiritual tourism which can start and can benefit India. We are housed to various spiritual leaders, the Buddhism, the Jainism, Hinduism, Sikhism, and therefore a circuit of spiritual tourism can start. The Prime Minister has made yoga very popular across the world, and therefore yoga tourism can start. Then there is natural treatments which are there popular in our country, basically Ayurvedic treatments, and the government has brought in the Ayush Ministry, and therefore medical tourism, in addition to the cheap and affordable medical facilities which India can provide in terms of modern medicine, we have alternate medicine opportunities also available. So to my mind, in the decade to come, and I totally agree with some of the foreign senior people who say it's not just the decade, the next century belongs to India. And I think in that next century, things like tourism are going to play a very big role. It is going to showcase India, but people are going to come to India not only for the technical skills that India has, IT or automobiles, but is also going to come for the soft skills which India can provide to the world, especially yoga and alternate medical treatment.
Indeed. That leads into my next question very well, Ms. Sikarwar, that given this kind of potential for India over the century, can India be a leader, world leader across sectors and services, software, banking, insurance, travel, tourism, what have you?
Definitely, Mark. If you see, our economy has been growing. We've surpassed UK.
Yes, but
various segments of the services sector. Fintech has seen tremendous growth, and we've seen how the whole digital interface. The world is eyeing, the way and seeing how the fintech in India has been adapted, and also how, as a business, it's really done well. It has picked up. Similarly, in the IT.
Okay, we seem to have again a problem with your connection, Mr. Karwar. So let me turn once again to Professor Charan Singh. So healthcare and tech combined, you were mentioning medical tourism, but we are talking about online consultations. We saw that during the COVID time, a big increase in that. It's saving the problems of people waiting in large queues at OPDs. Service management itself, managing all these services, that itself is a big business model, pretty much like supply chain management for goods.
I must mention one thing. You asked that very beautiful question on services and banking. Just imagine the Jandan accounts that we have demonstrated to the world that we have, and now we have nearly 46 crore Jandan accounts, and they have nearly 1.7 lakh crore of deposits there. Very commercial viable model. Now that is something for the world to see, that in financial services, India is way ahead. I must mention two more things on the financial services. The OTP which we get these days while doing transactions through our mobile phones, this is so unique to India, and the firewalls that India has, way ahead of the Western world, including America. I must also share, in 2012, when I was myself working in Washington at the International Monetary Fund, I used to see teams coming from Reserve Bank of India to meet Fed Reserve, and they used to come to meet Fed Reserve because Fed Reserve wanted to know what sort of regulation and supervision you did, that the Indian banking system did not collapse despite such a wide range of activities and such a wide range of banking institutions that you have in India. So I think to the rest of the world, as far as banking services are concerned, India has a lot more to offer, and banking services will be a great potential for export. Insurance is another sector. In the last few months, if you look at the changes that have been brought in by the Insurance Regulatory Authority, they are immense, and I think, and they are modernizing and they are opening up, and they are harping on increasing the insurance penetration in our country, and they're thinking of products along with banking. While banking through Jandan has gone very far and wide, they're thinking of leveraging and then ensuring that insurance services also go. So in the financial sector services, India has such great potential for the world to learn and to export these. I must also mention, you are probably aware that the free trade agreements with UK in services.
Yes.
I think that is an eye-opening. And then of course we had another free trade agreement with Australia on cyber-enabled critical technologies. So I think the services sector has done so exceedingly well. It's rightfully gained the best position as far as contribution to GDP or employment is concerned in our country. And I think now it is totally positioned to take over the world.
Professor Charan Singh, according to Invest India statistics, there has been a 15x increase in the total funding for startups, 9x increase in the number of investors who are interested, and a 7x increase in the number of incubators. So while this is across the startups, across all startups, we are looking at business confidence, isn't it, resulting from India's skills. We are able to deliver, hence people are interested. So the skills that are at the end, they are all services. So how do we harness this further, would you say?
I must mention this again, and I'm sorry I'm giving you some personal anecdotes. When I was at Stanford, I'm sorry to mention this, I had realized that the Silicon Valley had so many Indians there. This is of course common knowledge, but I had gone there and personally seen it. Now what is so special about India? The persistency that Indians will show you in their goals. That is something so special, that the startups succeed and Indians succeed in the startup culture. You mentioned about the unicorns in India, and in the country in 6 years you have had such unicorns.
Right.
The buzzword is the strength and the persistence to pursue something. Now that is becoming so apparent. So when you talk about the startup culture, you speak about the angel investors and other investors or other stakeholders. They are so clear that if an Indian is applying its mind because it's technology oriented and they have a certain discipline, and they are also coming from a country where English
Sure.
and democracy is important, you find
Yes.
that this culture and investment
Okay.
is invited there.
Let me turn to Deepshika Sikarwar once again, and I'm really sorry about the bad connection that we've had with you, but I'll leave you the final word. We see that employment in services, according to some estimates, is only about 25% of the total employment. We need to pull people away from agriculture. Professor Charan Singh was talking about that earlier. Is it done, you see, by, it's already happening by, us developing all these agricultural services and e-agricultural services, and we have to move in that direction?
We are definitely, and the whole emphasis of if you see the policy is to see how, the services economy, the various other sections of the economy are doing well. And, as these sectors expand and grow, and they would be providing employment, especially to the younger generation, which is sort of coming out of colleges and universities. And these are seen as the growth centers. These sectors would be the ones that would be driving future growth in the country. So obviously, a large part of the jobs, large part of the employment will have to come from these sectors. And as people move away in terms of employment from the agriculture sector, these sunrise sectors would provide that supportive employment that would happen. And we've seen, how technology is sort of transforming each and every service delivery. It's changing the way the entire ecosystem. So in
Absolutely.
terms of services, as people go on in future to consume more and more services, like it is done as India grows in size, it moves towards becoming a developed economy. That shift will definitely sort of come.
Right. We leave it there. Thank you very much, Deepshika Sikarwar, Senior Editor of the Economic Times, and Dr. Charan Singh, CEO of eGrow Foundation, for helping us understand how services are powering India's competitiveness. In conclusion, let me just say this, that Indian services sector, it was the largest recipient of FDI inflows worth US dollars 94.19 billion between April 2000 and March 2022. And for FY 2022, its contribution to the gross value added is 53%, getting back to the pre-pandemic levels. So India is an export hub also for software services, and IT outsourcing service market is expected to witness a 6 to 8% growth between 21 and 2024. So India's IT and business services market projected to reach 19.93 billion US dollars by 2025. And the Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal in the United States said that India is on the path to becoming a US dollar 30 trillion economy in the next 30 years on the back of strong GDP growth. And that growth, as we've discussed here, is going to be driven by services. Thanks very much for watching. Namaskar.